Leonardo da Vinci was not a painter. He was a scientist, and an engineer, and an architect, and a sculptor, and a theorist, and a draftsman, and yeah, he also painted a bit. But what does that matter? What can some guy who lived 500 years ago teach us about something actually important? Like cardistry. See, it wasn't what Leonardo created that made him so special. It was the way he thought. And that's something that all artists, including cardists, can learn from. But to truly understand the way a creative genius like Leonardo thinks, we gotta start back at the beginning. Leonardo di Serpero da Vinci was born April 15, 1452, in the small Tuscan countryside town of Vinci. That lines up. He was descended from a long line of notaries, but this profession never quite suited him. At around age 14, his family moved to Florence, where Leonardo quickly took a spot in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, a famed Florentine painter. This is where Leonardo's affinity for detail started to show. From sculptures and sketches to lightness versus darkness, Leonardo obsessed over the details of his work. What muscle should be most prominent at this angle? How long should an arm be relative to the torso? Does a small shadow at the corner of the mouth change the expression of the face? It's these details that separated Leonardo from other artists, and that's what brings us to our first lesson, which is to obsess over the details. It can be easy to cruise through the creation of a move with an that should be good type of attitude, allowing our first impulses to drive the formation of the move in its entirety. But our first instinct may not always be best. It's not until we slow down and zoom in on our work that we truly unlock its potential. How might a different finger work for this packet? Should I speed up or slow down the final closer? Does the opener look better from a front angle or a top-down angle? Creating tiny improvements in your moves add up, as it did with Leonardo and his work. In fact, it wasn't long before he outshone his own master, who supposedly put down his paintbrush for good after seeing a comparison of his own work next to Leonardo's. And so, after several years in Florence, Leonardo moved to Milan. But he didn't do so to pursue a painting career. He had something else in mind. Upon his arrival, Leonardo was in need of some funding. He wrote to the Duke of Milan, explaining the breadth and width of his talents, such that he could have a place in his court. The world's first resume. But painting and sculpting were hardly mentioned. In fact, Leonardo was applying as a military engineer. He wrote out 11 points detailing his expertise in areas such as knowing how to make an endless variety of bridges, or how he would contrive catapults, mangonels, trebuchets, and other machines of marvelous efficacy, and even his ability to guide water from one place to another. It wasn't until he had listed out his proudest military and engineering capabilities that he mentioned he could also paint. Just a simple footnote at the end of his ambitious resume. In the end, he got the job, but he didn't just draw up war machines and concoct military inventions. He studied life. Throughout his years at Milan, he filled notebooks with thousands of pages of detailed anatomical drawings. Bones, muscles, veins, arteries, how one ligament connected to another, the shape of one muscle when it got contracted. He did so by getting permission from local hospitals to dissect cadavers. But what was his goal here? Besides pure boundless curiosity, he wasn't just studying bones. He was studying how the human body was designed, how everything really worked. Because such a deep understanding at this level could inform his paintings in such a way that they don't just look real, but they feel real. And that brings us to our second tip, and that is to be interdisciplinary. Now, I'm not telling you to go off to your local cemetery, dig up some graves, and write all about it in your notebook, because that will get your hands pretty dirty. That's not good for cardistry. But what I am saying is to notice how he allowed one interest to fuel creativity in his understanding of another. Leonardo wasn't just thinking deeper within one box, he was borrowing from other boxes entirely. This isn't any different from cardistry. There are many genres and styles out there, from packet cuts to isolations to flares to XCM, but oftentimes we keep those move styles within their own boxes. If we're interested in creating a unique fan, for example, we may not even consider adding a single card flare, or incorporating that into a packet cut of some kind. But when we do, and we bridge gaps between the disciplines, we create opportunities for something really special. And it's not like cardists haven't been doing this before. You have Aviv, Noel, Sam Pratt. They're all excellent examples of being able to take different genres of cardistry and blend them together. One of my favorite examples of this being Sam's riffle shuffle cut, a move that stems from the most iconic shuffle of all time, but breaks off into its own fully developed packet cut. So the next time you're in a creative rut, think like Leonardo. Look at Aviv, Noel, Sam, and others for inspiration of how you can take one style of cardistry and blend it with the one that you're already most comfortable with or most familiar doing. I guarantee that'll spur some creativity. After nearly 2 decades in Milan, Leonardo returned to Florence, older, wiser, and more curious than ever. It was here when he began the Mona Lisa, and shortly after, other incredible works such as John the Baptist and the Virgin and Child with St. Anne. But unlike most commissions, Leonardo didn't just paint these and hand them off. He kept them for years. Throughout the rest of his life until 1519, Leonardo traveled from Florence back to Milan, then on to Rome, and finally to France at the invitation of the king, all the while carrying these paintings with him, pulling them out every so often to make a small adjustment, then putting them away again. A small shadow under the eye, a highlight on a curl of hair, a brushstroke here, a brushstroke there. For 16 years, Leonardo carried his paintings with him, all the way until his death, where they remained in his possession, still unfinished. And that brings us to our third lesson. A move is never finished. In cardistry, you might think you've created the final version of a flourish. You've filmed it, named it, uploaded it, but then months or even years later, you pick it back up again. You suddenly notice something different, a better rhythm, a smoother transition, a moment to let the move breathe. It's this subtlety within a move that makes it stand out, a moment or flow that has been tweaked and polished over a long period of time, allowing for natural movements to truly emerge, as if the cards were meant to move that way. And at the end of the day, that's really what we're after. Cardistry is art, and good art takes time. Not to say that all of your moves should take years to create. There's only a handful of paintings that Leonardo carried with him, and most of his stuff he finished or either just left it behind. But ultimately, it was the years of indistinguishable brushstrokes and tiny refinements that turned the Mona Lisa's smile into the billion-dollar enigma hanging today in the Louvre. While not all of your cardistry moves will end up as masterpieces, it is at least worth reconsidering the idea that once a move has been filmed and uploaded, that you can never revisit or retouch some of those movements. So what can Leonardo teach us about cardistry? It's more than you might think. His obsession with detail reminds us of the beauty that can be found in nuance. It's what took him from an inexperienced apprentice to outshining his master within a few years, focusing intensely on overlooked details such as light patterns or facial expressions. We can apply this in our own moves, examining every moment, transition, angle, and rhythm within our flourishes, looking for those subtle differences that add up. His passions and curiosity beyond paintings and art teach us to be interdisciplinary, looking at movements and motions from other styles of cardistry and combining them with our preferred styles. Look to Aviv, Sam, and other cardists for inspiration, remembering not just to dive deeper within your own box, but to borrow from other boxes entirely. Finally, his endless pursuit of depth and perfection within his own works shows us that a work of art is never finished, whether that be the Mona Lisa or an old original cardistry move you forgot you even had. It's fully reasonable to get a move down, film it, publish it, and store it away. But that doesn't mean that months or even years down the line, you can't take it back out again, look at it from a new perspective, and add a few brushstrokes here or there. Leonardo reminds us that creativity comes not from what you make, but how you think. When you open your mind to endless curiosity, you allow yourself to think a little more like a creative genius. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci was not a painter, or an architect, or an engineer, or all the above. He was a way of thinking, and changing the way you think about cardistry can change the way you do cardistry.